What's happening, fam? John here from AF Anime. We're back again with another One Piece chapter review, this time for chapter 1050, which is titled Honor. Now, when it comes to this chapter's contents, we have a lot to talk about and a little bit to speculate about, but first we're going to talk about the cover page. And as you can see here, Niji and Yonji are being saved by Ichiji and Reiju, who have just broken into the lab where they were being held. Now, the artwork for this cover page is actually pretty good, and there's just a lot to talk about in terms of what we're looking at here. Reiju just seems to kind of be in the background, but when it comes to Ichiji, let's just say that the savagery is on point. And although that little Charlotte psychopath is holding a knife, let's just say that Oda has no qualms about having kids getting roughed up in this series. Now, if you don't remember who the three Charlottes are who are present in this laboratory, we have Charlotte Kato, who seems to be on fire back there. We have Charlotte Brownie, who's receiving a boot to the face, as well as Charlotte Enana, who is the 8-year-old being throttled by the neck. Now, ultimately, this is not a huge update, at least in comparison to the last cover page where we saw that they were freed from the book, but considering that Ichiji and Reiju are only now breaking into the lab after Yonji and Niji have been freed, I think it's safe to say for sure that they must have defeated Charlotte Montdor somewhere on the island before they reached this lab. In any case, we all know that this cover story is about the Vinsmoke family escaping Big Mom's island. The one thing that is worth consideration here is how and why Ichiji and Reiju returned. Either they came back for their siblings out of the kindness of their hearts, or maybe they came back for the sake of protecting their technology from Big Mom. Either way, I think it'll be very interesting to see where this turns out, because I ultimately feel that at some point near the end of the story, Vinsmoke Judge may go back on his decision to manipulate his kids and their abilities to feel emotions. So I'm excited to see what the implications are for the Vinsmoke family by the time this cover story ends. Moving on though to this week's content, this time with chapter 1050. The pacing is a bit odd. It seems to jump around a lot, spend a lot of time in certain places, a little bit of time in others, but for me at least, I felt it was a pretty smooth narrative. Now, I'm not going to do a full-blown recap, but when it comes to the first two pages, I feel like there's a lot that needs to be elaborated on here. First and foremost, we have these three panels of Kaido falling into the magma to his supposed demise, but we can see that Kaido starts off in his dragon form, and before he reaches the magma, he reverts back to his base form. And I don't get the feeling at all that this is intentional on his part. I feel that he genuinely is unconscious and can't really help himself. So while there is a possibility that Oda just wants us to think that Kaido is dead, showing us this, three-panel homage of him reverting back to his base form, I don't actually believe that Kaido is dead, but I'll explain that later in the video towards the end. And next up for discussion is going to be this diagram where we see the two holes that Big Mom and Kaido fell down into in order to reach the magma. But there is some interesting things to take away from this image. For one, we can see that where the waterfall is in this reservoir of water, cracks have been made to give that water access to the magma, which may or may not save Kaido and Big Mom. It could also be responsible for the volcanic reaction that we see later in the chapter. I just think it's interesting that Oda showed us this before actually showing Kaido hitting the lava. So it's a very interesting diagram, but we'll talk more about this here in a bit. Next up is going to be Luffy, Yamato, and Momentosuke and their interactions on these first two pages. We can see that Yamato catches Luffy. That's kind of a cool thing to really see there. I mean, Yamato was in the basement, and I suppose maybe just magically reached all the way to the top before Luffy could fall. And yes, I know that Onigashima is on the ground here, but for some reason when Yamato is running, it says above Wano. In any case, right after that, we see these three panels showing us a happy Yamato, an unconscious Luffy, and a winded Momonosuke, as well as a bit of a celebration going on within the Fire Festival with the launching of the lanterns. And this really just kind of says a lot, because the more I think about it, Luffy, Yamato, and Momonosuke kind of were like a trio of sorts during the end of this whole event. Yes, Luffy did take Kaido down by himself in the end, but to ignore the roles that Momonosuke and Yamato played would be really a shame. I mean, they've honestly probably got more to claim in terms of helping toward this victory than majority of the Straw Hats would. Now, I know we're not far off from this moment when it comes to the anime. The anime is only a little bit behind now, but ultimately I do think that when we get to see these episodes play out, like me personally, I don't watch the weekly episodes. I'll probably go back and watch all of Wano when I can binge it, but I would imagine the cooperation and the communication between this trio of characters in particular, meaning Luffy, Yamato, and Momonosuke, is really going to come off as something special, very similar to Luffy and Law when they were dealing with Doflamingo. Now, after we return to the Fire Festival, we do get a bit of a touching moment and a catch-up with Tinguyama and Otoko. And honestly, this is a really good scene for me. They spent a good amount of time here, probably more than that was necessary, but since this moment between these two characters is the namesake for the chapter, meaning honor, I think it's a great way for us to understand how Yasuya played a huge part in this success when it comes to making that sacrifice to push all of the people of Wano, the samurai in particular, to really wanting to put their foot down in terms of dealing with Kaido and Orochi. And while I personally would normally just kind of be about this moment, I actually do like it because with all the crazy stuff going on, all of the events, all of the different locations, all of the big fights, it's easy to forget how this all truly kicked off and started spiraling toward its conclusion, and that was the death of Yasuya. Like I said, it did eat up a good amount of this chapter's content, but ultimately I think it was a good move on Oda's part to remind us of the bravery that the character Yasuya endured in his own death, and the fact that they changed the lantern to being more of an honorific rather than a, regret of death. I think that was a really beautiful move. Now, right after that, we get this beautiful panel of the Fire Festival and all the lanterns being lifted up, and then we get a smooth transition into Nekomamushi, giving this huge announcement to all of Wano, from what I can tell, from above, claiming that Luffy is the victor and that Kaido has been smashed into the ground. Now, this is kind of an ongoing trend when it comes to One Piece. Whenever Luffy defeats a big bad, there's always someone available to announce it to every person on the entire island what has gone down. And we get a few reaction panels of people looking surprised and or excited about Luffy's victory, but there is a bit of a different feel when it comes to this chapter because it's undercut with some serious undertones. For example, we see that while everyone is, or not everyone, while some people are celebrating, Frankie is freaking out about the condition of Zoro. And on top of that, we have Usopp freaking out about the condition of Okiku and Kinemon. And when it comes to Momonosuke, I think it's fair to say that most of us would have thought that he would open up the borders immediately after Kaido's defeat. But we get these kind of serious decision he makes here for him not to open the borders and for Zunisha to also respect that opinion. And to spice things up even more, we actually see that a lot of the Beast Pirates still outnumber the rebellion in general. And as such, they don't seem to have truly given up on the idea of winning, even if Kaido was defeated. And honestly, I think that's a very good move on Oda's behalf because the Beast Pirates or the Animal King Pirates really aren't the type of people who just give up a numbers advantage because they lost their leader. They're not just going to be like, oh man, our leader lost, so let's pack up and sail off. No, they can still take over and still win the battle in general. Maybe even if Kaido is dead, that doesn't necessarily mean the rebellion is over. Now, Yamato does show up to threaten the remainder of the Beast Pirates who still have the will to fight, but I think Oda made an interesting decision here not to show us their response to her threat, because the panel after that, we see that everyone can feel this earthquake occurring, and then the panel after that, we see here that Kaido and Big Mom are either silhouetted in the lava or still have yet to reach the lava. And Oda clearly has some interesting thing planned here because of the order and the destinations that we see in the next handful of panels. For one, we see that he is specifically focusing on Udon when it comes to this volcanic eruption. And two, we get the official announcement of Luffy being the victor as this volcano erupts. Now, I'll give my thoughts on that here in a second. First, we'll wrap up the chapter's contents with talking about Momonosuke and his big reveal to the entirety of Wano that the pink dragon was in fact him. And he assures everyone that everything is fine, that the eruption itself is a result of Kaido's final defeat. Then after that, we see a panel of the poof symbol popping up just below Momonosuke's dragon form, which my assumption is that he's reverting back to his human form, giving us that huge poof. Now, the smoke from this transformation does provide Hiyori or Komurasaki with a good cover to get a interesting reveal. We see her pop out of the smoke, but before that, we see that there are 7 silhouettes around her. And going from left to right, I'm pretty certain that we have Kawamatsu, Nekomamushi, Denjiro. This character, I'm not 100% sure on who they are, but going further, we also see that we got Raizo, and who I believe is Shinobu. So my best guess as to that random silhouette that is next to her, that is probably Momonosuke in his human form. Now, at the end of this chapter, it is highly implied that Denjiro wants to reveal Komurasaki or Hiyori as being the new shogun of Wano, and that's something I can get on board with, but there is the possibility that he could be talking about Momonosuke since he says that we brought the new shogun of Wano. But then again, if it is Hiyori, it would continue the trend of Luffy befriending princesses who ultimately are going to be running their country. So that is going to pretty much be it for the chapter review for 1050. It is a great chapter. It's a bit all over the place as I said before, but ultimately it still felt like a pretty smooth narrative. Now, we don't get a whole lot of hype in this chapter. I will say though that if I had to give it a rating, it's going to be a 9 out of 10. The artwork was very good throughout the entire chapter and consistent, and the story's narrative and its pacing and the storytelling for this chapter was just phenomenal. My only issue is that with the amount of time they jump around and the certain characters popping up in multiple places throughout this chapter, I feel like the sense of time is not really clear here. So given the explosion and the possibility that that could mean Kaido or Big Mom's return or both, but ultimately I do feel like having a good sense of understanding when it comes to the time that passes in this chapter could help elaborate a bit more on exactly what's going on when it comes to this explosion and how long it's been since Kaido and Big Mom have been, you know, quote unquote in the magma. So that is going to do it for my chapter review. If I had to give a bit of discussion, one thing I do think we're going to see within the next couple chapters is that Big Mom and Kaido have in fact survived. And my reasoning for that is a couple things that we see throughout this chapter. For one, we don't see them disintegrating or, you know, vanishing like we see in so many shonen manga. But when you take a look at the diagram that we were shown in the first page, we can see that with those cracks, there is now a chance for the water to reach the magma, which most of us know when water and magma mix, it just creates hot stones. So it's possible that that could have been a route for Big Mom and Kaido to survive. And then on top of that, the big explosion could serve as a kind of tense moment here in the near future. And that could set up the opportunity for the Beast Pirates to get riled up again, but ultimately I don't think that's going to happen. What I think is going to happen is what I said back in my Big Mom video not terribly long ago, and it's that Big Mom and Kaido will survive the events of Wano and will eventually leave Wano. But I think that they will be stepping out of the way for the next generation, and more specifically accepting Luffy as being Joy Boy. Now, I don't think that this means that they will become Grand Fleet members, so to speak, but I do think that they, for the most part, will be on Luffy's side when it comes to, you know, being forced to choose between helping Luffy or helping the world government. I think they're going to lead towards Luffy. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on chapter 1050 of One Piece, which is titled Honor. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you're still here, I really appreciate that. If you guys enjoy content like this, go ahead, like, share, and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate that. It would help out the channel. Also, if you guys want to talk about this chapter and the many implications that come from it, hit me up in the comment section down below. I'm always listening. Once again, thank you guys very much for tuning in. My name is John. I'm with AFA, and I'll catch you in the next video.